I'd like to call this meeting to order, the Board of Education, School District of Baraboo for Monday, October the 13th, 2014, with roll call. Mr. Cummings.
Here.
Mr. McNevin.
Here.
Mr. Neering.
Here.
Mr. Mortimer.
Here.
Ms. Riley.
Here.
Mr. Bedrow.
I am here.
And Bodak here. Continue with the pledge. The flag is by the clock on the wall. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would entertain a motion for the approval of the board meeting of September the 22nd as printed.
So moved.
Second. I think I have to explain it.
Motion by Riley, seconded by Bedrow. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Note Mr. Mortimer's abstention.
I think me too.
Here, Arthur.
I abstain.
Mr. Mortimer and Mr. McNevin's abstention. Brings us to correspondence, of which I have none, and no other board members presented any to me. However, we do have quite a bit of administrative correspondence.
I'm going to pass around a brochure from UW Stevens Point and UW Whitewater. They're using Baraboo's cohort, GT cohort, in their marketing materials and highlighting some of the things that are going on in our district with our educators. Sean has, I think you're going to need an extra arm there, Sean.
Yeah, Gary.
Sean has a
I got it.
poster that they have made up again, highlighting the work of our educators, and you can see some of them in the photos there. So that's a real positive, and kudos to our teachers who are part of that program.
All
Also,
night or can I get?
we could leave it layout for people if they want to look at it. We also received communication from Purdue University that they received the grant for Total School Cluster Grouping Project, and they are going to include the Baraboo School District in that at no charge to our district. I included an abstract of the project in the board packet. And then I also included a letter to R.R. Donnelly. Every year they provide an annual student donation. This year we received $1,000 to go toward elementary playground items like jump ropes and playground balls and things of that nature. Also, DPI sent a communication that we meet the requirements of IDA, and we are to be commended for the achievement. As I understand, that's not real easy to get the first time around, Danny. So again, congratulations to the staff who worked very hard to meet those requirements. And then last but not least, John Blazinski and Sue Paulson were at the state capitol today, and Abe was being recognized as a Title I School of Recognition, and he has a plaque to prove they were there. And that's all I have for correspondence.
Any other administrative correspondence? Anyone else? Hearing none, brings us to the portion of the agenda entitled Correspondence.
Number 3.
Oh, public viewpoints, I'm sorry. Is there anyone here for public viewpoints tonight? I have a sign-up sheet with Mr. Mueller on it, so if I get him to come up, I'll let him go first, and we'll find out if there's anybody else.
I think I know how to work this thing. My name is Rick Miller. I'm a 35-year veteran of the Baraboo School District, and I've been happily retired the last 3 or 4 years. And my wife has also joined me this year. Now, I'm here on behalf of some of my colleagues here that are getting real close to that also. And I know that you're in the process tonight of meeting on some things that you may go to in another direction for post-retirement benefits. And I'd just like to say that a lot of things have changed the last 4 or 5 years, which you're certainly aware of, and I know it's very expensive and all that kind of stuff, and there's a good chance that you might be lowering some of those benefits. But a lot of my colleagues in this room that have been 25 to 30 years veterans, you know, they came in under a certain set of rules, and they kind of thought that maybe when they got near this age, they might be able to make an educated decision that they might have 6 years to 8 years, 4 years to 6 years worth of a benefit package. Now, that may not be available anymore. I mean, they put in 25 or 30 years thinking that when they hit that 56, 57 age group that they might have a choice and a chance to get out here. That may not happen. And I don't know for sure what you're going to, but I do know it's very, very expensive, and there's a good chance the benefits may not be as good for them as it was for me. Now, I also want to caution you, when we start cutting benefits, we've talked about this before, there's no reason to say that they're going to leave. I mean, if you all of a sudden take a benefit package now that's about 6 years and you cut it back to 5 or 4, or you totally get out of the insurance business and you decide you don't want to pay so much money, what's to say that some of these teachers aren't going to say, well, I can't afford to leave at 57 or 58 or 59. And all of a sudden they're working to 60, 61, 62 years old. Now, I understand that if a teacher that was at the end of the schedule is making about, let's say, $65,000, just to make it real easy, and you replace them with a $35,000 teacher, I know and you know it's not a $30,000 savings because there's benefits going both ways and stuff like that. But every year that teacher sticks around for another year, that's another $30,000 more that you're paying for that teacher. So, I mean, you may end up saving the benefit, but as far as getting a teacher to stay till he's 61 or 62 that may have left at 57, there's $30,000 a year. Now, you replace that with a younger teacher, and obviously they're getting their insurance, but trust me, it's not quite the savings that you may imagine it is. And maybe this is premature to even be bringing this thing up because I know you haven't talked about it yet, but I was asked to show up, and here I am. Thank you.
Is there anyone else for public viewpoints tonight? Any other public viewpoints? Any other public viewpoints? Hearing none, I'd like to move on the agenda to what is always a pleasant part of our discussion and evening, and that's the recognition section. And we have with us tonight a group of our speech and language pathologists.
Thanks for inviting us here tonight. I want to thank you for your time and attention. We're going to talk a little bit tonight about what we do in the Baraboo School District. We're going to share who we are, for those of us that are here, and we're going to share a little bit at the end about some of the data that we've been looking at and some of the data that we've collected. So, I'm going to get started. What do speech and language pathologists do in the schools? We identify and provide therapy for students ages 3 through 21 with speech and language disabilities. And there are 4 main areas of speech and language disabilities. The first is articulation, and that is what we're typically known for as speech and language pathologists. Those are the students that can't say their S's and their R's. But typically the students we see are much more involved, and you cannot understand pretty much anything they're saying. And we have a student example on here. I don't know if that'll link on here. I'm going to show part of this briefly so you can get an idea of what a student might look like when we see them at the age of 3. Now, the mom is a speech and language pathologist, so she's very encouraging and she's very positive, but really you can't understand anything this young boy is saying. Sure. Can you hear me? Okay. What are you up to? I think you get the idea. The next area of students that we work with is fluency, or kids that stutter. I'm going to show a brief sample of this one.
How to read from my work is stuff like I just did. Stuttering is not something that you can help, something that just comes along with some people.
I get worried, like what other people might think if I do stutter.
Kids should ignore the people who tease them about stuttering because it's not their fault. I worry about it when I'm on S words, and they always get me stuck on stuff. On word with an S. I'm kidding.
Help us help those who stutter. Donate now. Please.
kids with language disabilities. This is actually the biggest group of our population that we work with in the public schools. Children with expressive language delays have difficulty expressing themselves in the classroom, and children with receptive language delays have difficulty understanding what's said to them. So their language level in the classroom may be at a 3-year-old level, and their teacher is talking at a 6 or 7-year-old level. So they're having significant difficulty processing and comprehending and following directions in the classroom. The last, I'm gonna leave those. I'm not gonna show all of these. If you're interested in them, I'll leave them, and you can check them out at another time. But there are student examples of those as well. The last one that we have is a voice disorder, and that's very uncommon in the schools. They're usually those children have a medical diagnosis, and so we don't see a lot of children with voice disorders, but it is part of the state criteria.
What is a voice disorder?
It's when the student may have vocal nodules. These are in your vocal folds, and so when the child goes to speak, there's no sound that comes out, or the sound is so is compromised by their vocal nodules, or maybe something that happened to the voice. They may not be able to talk in class. Actually, teachers get vocal nodules more often because they're talking loudly and they abuse their voice by speaking so loudly. So it's pretty uncommon in kids, but we do see it sometimes. For evaluation, we spend a lot of time doing evaluations on students. They have to meet the state qualifying criteria, so set by the state of Wisconsin. There's a link there for that. In order to qualify for services, they must be 1.75 standard deviations from the mean on a formal evaluation test, either in articulation or language. In the area of language, they must qualify in 2 tests. Treatment, we provide treatment everywhere. We go to homes, daycares, Head Start, 4K, all the sites for 4K. We go to private and the public schools. So we travel a lot all over the district. We provide therapy based on goals that we take from our formal data that we gain from in our testing. We write individualized education plans for each student, or service plans in the private schools, and those are good for 1 calendar year. Therapy services are provided about 40 to 60 minutes per week, and at times we go into classrooms if it works for that student, but a lot of the students that we see are pulled out of class into a resource room. We take a lot of documentation of student progress, both formal and informal. We use this data to do Medicaid billing, which the district gets reimbursed for. Annual IEP service plan meetings with parents, and we write progress reports that go along with report cards, and we also attend parent-teacher conferences to share that data. Now a little bit about who we are. I'm Angela Nizer. I have 13 years of experience in Baraboo School District and 17 years total. My home base is GLW Elementary, but I also travel to all the private schools, Community Christian School, St. John's, and St. Joe's this year. I'm on the 21st Century Committee. I'm a mentor, and I'm Rachel's, I'm her clinical fellowship peer supervisor. I have 3 kids, and that's my family. Katie is not here right now. She's on maternity leave.
Yeah, and as you can see, our colleague Katie, she graduated from Baraboo in 2004, so she's kind of a homegrown girl. We're happy to have her. She got her master's from UW Stevens Point, so kind of reminding us of Stevens Point again. And she has 4 years of experience as a SLP in Baraboo. She does 4K sites, and she does itinerant work with 3-year-old students. She also has 2 children of her own, and you can see the most recent one there, little Landry, so she's a cutie pie.
And I'm Michelle Feld, for those of you that don't know me, and I've been in the district a while, a long while, and I had a total of 28 years of experience. I worked for CISA 4 and CISA 5 prior to coming here. And I work solely at East Elementary this year, although I've worked the parochial schools and I've worked at the high school as well, different years. Depending on our caseloads, we kind of move around to fulfill the needs as best we can. I have been a mentor for a number of years. I started on the first PBIS team in the district at East, and I'm now an internal coach and part of the secondary systems team for PBIS. I'm a BERT first responder. I'm on the SOS committee and a member of multiple high school booster clubs. As you can see, I have a son who's a junior and a daughter who's a sophomore, so I try to be involved in as many activities as I can.
What's BERT?
BERT, that's our building emergency response team.
And I'm Amanda Kiro, and I'm mainly housed at West Kindergarten Center, but I'm also at the high school, so I get to see the little ones and the oldest ones. It's kind of fun. This is my second year working with Baraboo and working as an SLP. I started out as my first job out of grad school here. I got my master's from the University of Wyoming, a member of the compensation committee. That's a new thing this year, so I'm looking forward to that. And I'm getting married in June.
And this is another one of our colleagues who wasn't able to attend, but her name is Carla, and she is new as well to district. Right now, you'll find her at Jack Young Middle School as well as North Freedom Elementary School, and she also does some work with early childhood. She is a communications committee member, and she does have some previous experience as an SLP. You can see that she previously worked at Divine Savior Healthcare and Whitwer Children's Therapy Center. And she also assisted the speech-language pathologist at the Montello School District part-time, which is really what drew her in to Baraboo and working in the school system. And she completed some internships in Dubuque at Carver Elementary School, Sageville Elementary School, and Mercy Medical Center. So that's Carla, and there's a picture of her with her husband there. And I'm Rachel. I'm new here, and I work at ABE with the lovely ladies over there. I see some familiar faces. I'm very happy to be here. I got my master's at UW-Madison, and I completed some internships at John Muir Elementary, South Medicine Head Start, which this is actually a picture from my time there, which I got permission to use. So really some great kiddos there. And also at the UW Hospital. I have worked as an elementary English teacher in France. I worked there for about 2 years in summer camps and elementary schools, and I had a really great time there, so that's kind of what drew me back to the school systems, but as an SLP.
So just a little bit about the training that's required for us, to get ultimately to this point. So typically you get an undergraduate degree in communicative disorders. If you don't get an undergraduate degree in that, a lot of people go back to school and get what's called a post-bac, so they take specialized classes before applying to grad school. And then grad school is typically about 2.5 years. There's a minimum of 37 graduate level credit hours of different courses we have to take, in addition to 400 hours of experience with both adults and children in a variety of the different areas of speech pathology. And ultimately you'll get your graduate degree. Then you have to, it's not quite over from there, you have to continue on and get your praxis exam for speech pathology, and then obtain a job and work your clinical fellowship year, which is what Rachel is doing now and what I did last year. And that's basically a 36 weeks of full-time experience under the supervision of a certified speech therapist like Angie. And then after you finish your CFY, that's when you then apply for your C's, as they call them, which stand for Certification of Clinical Competence from the American Speech Language Hearing Association. And then to maintain your C's, you have to get 30 CEUs every 3 years. So it's kind of a lot of work, but it shows that, we're here for a purpose. And then the different types of students we work with, I'll just kind of go down the list. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Children who might have apraxia, which is a motor planning problem, they kind of know what they want to say, but the connections in their brain to their muscles to get the words out isn't quite there. Articulation, kids with ADD or ADHD, autism, emotional disabilities, kids who are deaf or hard of hearing, kids with mild to severe cognitive disabilities, feeding and swallowing disorders. That's not very common in the school districts, but we are trained to work with those types of individuals. Kids with cleft lips and palates, learning disabilities, traumatic brain injuries, voice disorders, again, not as common in the school setting. And then lastly, nonverbal kids who might need to use augmentative or alternative communication to speak, which a lot of our kids, especially in the high school, some of the severe kids will use an iPad, and they'll use a device where they touch different symbols, and the device essentially talks for them because they don't have the words to communicate what they want or need.
and as speech and language pathologists, we are really interested in how younger children learn language. So we've been looking a lot at how children develop language birth to kindergarten. And one of the reasons we're doing this is because when kids come into kindergarten, they need to have the language skills to support what we expect them to do in kindergarten. And a lot of it goes back to parenting. And parents need to be talking, singing, and playing with their children. And this is a link to a study that was done called the 30 million word gap. And these are children that they tracked up through the age of 4. And they looked at socioeconomic status. And children from high socioeconomic status were spoken to much more by their parents. And by the age of 4, it made a 30 million word gap. So there's a study for a link there if you want to look at it. This impacts them significantly by the time they come to kindergarten. The other thing that we've been looking at is quality daycare. There was a study in the Journal of Developmental Psychology a few years ago that said that it doesn't matter the socioeconomic status. What really matters is how much they've been talked to and played with in daycare, and that the children in the high quality daycares outperformed the children in low quality daycares in every measure of their study, regardless of their socioeconomic income or status. So, and they demonstrated double vocabulary size by age 3. So this impacts children a lot by the time they come to kindergarten. Children who have not been exposed to quality language environments have a difficult time catching on with the language-based classroom. The classroom is language-based, and catching up with their peers. So we want to try to do more with them when they're younger. So if we can get them in as soon as they turn 3, we have a much better success rate by the time they get to kindergarten, and the teachers will see much stronger skills. A strong relationship exists between a student's expressive and receptive language development, early literacy skills, reading comprehension, and written composition. Children with language disabilities are also at risk for deficits in later academic achievement. So.
And as some of you may recall, when 4K first started, I came and talked to the board regarding what we were predicting was if we get children in earlier, we will get them out of speech and at an earlier age as well. And so that first year, that was one of our speech department goals, was to track the students to see how we were doing with that. And our first year, we had 29 students that were referred and placed in speech therapy during their first year of 4K. 4 of them moved away. We have 3 students that remain in speech now that had other learning difficulties that kind of compounded more than just speech therapy. But 22 of our 29 students have been dismissed by the end of 2nd grade, where in the past it was 4th grade or 5th grade when we were dismissing most of our kids. So that's 88% of our kids that we had in that first year of 4K that were dismissed by the end of 2nd grade, which was our goal. So we were really pleased to see that data supported by what we thought and what the research had said. So, and we've continued to grow in our numbers as far as kids in 4K. The next one, please. And the median caseload in Wisconsin, according to the 2012 year, was 40. Now, this year alone, I have, coming from 4K, where we're getting them in and evaluating them earlier, in one kindergarten class, I happen to have 12 students this year for speech. Some of them have other disabilities as well. But caseload, there's a difference between caseload and workload. Caseload is strictly looking at our numbers. And our numbers for speech have continued to be high. This year, mine is starting out at the highest, and I don't have to travel between schools. I'm starting out with 50 students on my caseload, which can be a challenge for scheduling. Workload also takes into consider the severity of our kids. And what we're finding as well as a general trend is with our TI, we are getting fewer kids overall that have multiple disabilities and in other programs such as learning disabilities, the CD programs. but they're getting more severe. So that impacts our workload, because when we're working with students with more disabilities, more involvement, we need to have more time with them. So that's really impacting our workload and our caseload and our scheduling. They continue to rise, and I would say that ASD, which is autism spectrum disorder, is impacting our overall special ed department, because we're also diagnosing them earlier and getting them into services earlier. And some of the things that we do in our speech department, we run on a 4-to-1 model, which means we see students directly for 4 weeks, and then we have 1 week off, where it gives us, when we have 60 to 75 IEPs to do in a year, it's a lot of IEP paperwork to do. So we take time during those to do evaluations on new referrals, re-evaluations on our students, on our current students, so we don't have to cancel therapy classes because we don't have a lot of prep time in our regular day. We also do Medicaid billing, and we consult with teachers as we can, and do some of our planning that we don't get in a typical day when other teachers have their regular prep times. We don't necessarily have that. So that's what we do in our week, in our indirect, or we like to call it integrated week, where we get the opportunity to go into classrooms and see how kids are maintaining their skills in other settings, as well as doing the various paperwork and meetings that we have. So that's kind of speech therapy in a nutshell. Thank you very much for acknowledging our department, and we appreciate it.
Thank you for taking the time to share a little bit about what you do, not only within the speech and language program, but all the other leadership roles and hats that you wear in the district too. So on behalf of the district, thank you very much for the work that you do. Thank you.
Angie,
Hi.
thank you. Hi, thank you so much, and thank you all.
You're welcome.
My particular interest would be how this board can support the growing needs that you have. You've given us a wonderful overview of the work you do and of the significance and importance. If I understand correctly, the earlier we can intervene with these services, the better we are able to support the child as they move through a very demanding curriculum. How can we support you? That is the question that I am most interested in, and I would like you all to feel very comfortable in sharing your needs, not only your expertise, but your needs with this board.
Okay.
Who wants to stand up
Well,
first?
one of the things that we
feel stretched pretty thin right now with
Thank
Katie
you.
on maternity leave. So I just feel like right now my home base is GLW, and we have more students there this year than we've ever had. I remember it was a big deal when GLW ever had over 300 kids. We have over 350 this year. So I'm getting lots of referrals in, and we actually, when we go to the private schools, I am screening and testing kids that come from Spring Green and Reedsburg and other places, because that's part of the special education law and what's required. So it's bigger than even Baraboo is at this point. So because they're coming from other places, and we're still required to complete that paperwork. So I at this point am feeling stretched pretty thin, and I want to make sure that I'm doing the best job that I can do for my students. But I think we want to closely monitor kind of some of this early childhood development and what we can be doing early on, because our research and the research that's out there is showing that that's so important.
It is, and we worked with Danny 2 years ago and worked really hard to find the right model. Many of the districts in Wisconsin will run a 3-to-1 model, where they do direct therapy 3 weeks and then they're off 1 week. For us, we stretched it a little farther than that, so we can give the kids 4 solid weeks of therapy and then have our integrated week where we're doing a number of things. That helped us tremendously because we aren't classroom teachers, so we don't get the same picture of prep times and things like that. So that integrated indirect week really helps us to stay ahead of the paperwork and all of the demands that we have for special education and the Medicaid billing and all of that kind of stuff. That helped us a lot. But we're also, because our caseloads are getting more severe and more involved, we can't group kids. If we can group 2, maybe 3 kids for articulation therapy, we can do that, but for the most part, they have such specific needs, and we have to abide by the IEP as well, that it's hard, we have to do more things individually with students, which spreads us across the board more. So just having an understanding that it looks different than a classroom teacher is helpful.
And if I'm hearing correctly, then these can't be outsourced to China
Yeah.
or or India.
Right.
And so
Well, part of the problem is that when we're absent, there's nobody to fill in for us. There's not a speech and language pathologist that we can find as a substitute ever, hardly. I mean, I think we were very lucky to find someone for Katie that had retired from the district. So that's part of the 4-1 model. If we're ever gone, we need to make up all of those sessions during our indirect or integrated therapy.
And I didn't say
Yeah,
that.
so
we have makeup
that's important. And
sessions
then
as well.
another thought is, some of our data, when we see a student individually for 10 or 15 minutes, we can get about 200 more practices with them during that 10 to 15 minute window. If I see a student in groups of 4, I can maybe get 25 in. You just need that time to have the drill and repetition for instruction. It's a different type of instruction that they're getting in the classroom. We need that practice time. So if my caseload's down, I can get students out faster. Last year I dismissed 13 kids. The year before that I dismissed 14. But when my numbers get too high and my caseload gets above, into the 50s, then it's, I'm combining more groups. I'm making my groups bigger. I'm stretched thinner, and then it takes longer for the students to get dismissed from therapy. So
I think you said you go to private schools too?
I do, yes. Speech and
Are
language
we-
language therapy is the only service that's provided in the private schools.
So are we as a public school required by law to go to a private schools?
Yes, we
Yes.
are.
Yeah.
And I would just like to follow on Ed's comment that your services and what the district is providing extends beyond the district itself to serve children of need.
Right.
And that in order for you to do your job as effectively as you can, that we need our citizens to be aware that you're serving larger groups within the community, geographically as well as in silos. And that the only way that can be supported seems to me by increasing the budget allocations for those services so that additional speech pathologists can be hired to reduce the caseloads, et cetera, et cetera. And once again, that is a political issue because it has to do with how money flows from the legislature to our districts. And I just want all of our people who are out there listening to understand that. I say it at every board meeting. I will continue to say it. We have to support our children, and that happens through the legislation's releasing of funds to our public schools. And thank you for your work.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brings us to agenda item under reports. This stems from a Buildings and Grounds Committee meeting, and we are fortunate to have with us tonight our Buildings and Grounds Director. So I'm going to turn it over to the Chair of the Buildings and Grounds Committee, who can then introduce the Buildings and Grounds Director for a little bit of background for the rest of the board.
Last week, the Buildings and Grounds Committee met concerning the water and mold problems at the admin building. Now, that's over 100 years old. I believe it was built in 1909. And I guess it'd make a real good haunted house. Well, we have a lot of different programs coming up now with the city of Baraboo and the talk of putting a public building there. It seems senseless to put extensive remodeling into that building when we might be forced to sell it. So in the meantime, Dan, I'll turn it over to Dan here, and we've got remediation going on right now to protect our employees and stuff right now. So I'll let Dan give you the specifics.
Alright, so we had EMC, which is our environmental consultant. They came in back in February and did an indoor air quality test. Basically, they took air samples at 8 different locations in the building, 4 in the basement, basically southeast, northeast, northwest, north, southwest corners of the building, and the same thing in the office areas where we conduct business, and then we also went up into the attic. I think there was 1 or 2 up there. In February, it showed that the air samples didn't actually show much mold, but there's visible signs that there's mold present in the basement. But in February, it's cold, the air is dry, your mold spores need moisture to survive. So we came back and we did one in August, and we did the same air sampling. There's visible, obvious presence of water infiltration throughout the basement. The mold samples basically showed that there was a couple mold readings that read higher than what the mold meter, whatever, not sure what it is that they use, but it was off the charts. So it was basically higher than what it could read. So there was 2 places in the basement and one spot in the northeast corner of the building, on the working levels where our staff worked, had really high mold counts. Really, there's multiple issues with that building regarding, if you want to solve it, you need to stop the infiltration of water. There's no sump, there's no well, there's no drain tile outside the building. The northwest corner of the building, you have these 3-foot by 4-foot fascia blocks that go on the building. One of those is fallen off. So obviously we're losing, we have water infiltration from there. One thing that we can do is a Band-Aid, but I mean it would help, is put an industrial dehumidifier in the basement to draw that moisture out in the summer. And then they have dehumidification fans that we can exhaust air out. But again, what we're doing is just taking the air that's already coming into the building and trying to exhaust it out as quickly as possible. And then the other thing it would do in the basement basically is kind of make a negative air pressure. So right now we have whatever's in the basement is trying to work its way up. So if we exhaust out in the basement, we can create a negative air pressure in the basement to try to slow down or stop whatever's coming up. But again, the real solution is you got to figure out what's causing the water, the water infiltration. But again, I can get a dehumidifier in there, and put dehumidifying exhaust fans in there, which would help, kind of. But again, it's not solving the problem. It's just kind of masking and helping the conditions that these guys are working in right now.
This is the first test we've done in that building, correct?
Since I've been here, I don't remember if there was, EMC had done anything. I think there was talk, but I'm not sure if anything was done.
Well, there's been other things like when we put the boiler and what have you for asbestos and whatever, and there's been some remediation on that, but it's just an old building. It's got crumbling foundations on it, and it's just old, sort of like me, But
we have water.
Easy, Gary, easy.
But Dan's doing his darndest there to get that level down so we don't have any health risks with the employees and stuff like this.
The other thing is, we just have a hot water boiler system that's that feeds radiators, so we don't introduce any fresh air to the building at all right now with the HVAC system that's currently in place. The only fresh air that comes in is every time somebody opens a door or whatever air leaks we have coming through our windows.
What initiated the assessments in February was a number of complaints from staff about health issues. And so we thought that we needed to investigate that. I mean, obviously you can see the mold on some of the documents in the basement and some of the visible signs. But again, like Dan said, this is meeting with EMC. This is kind of a short-term solution. But, at some point the board is going to have to look at the status of that building. If we're gonna keep it, we need to maintain it. And you could see with the documents I included from MSA's 5-year facility plan, it's, I think, $900,000 to bring it into compliance and take care of some of the maintenance needs. So
Yeah, I mean, I know we're going through planning phases, but I mean, you know, we may have to, I think, really take a harder look at the administration building and where we're staffing our administration at this point. I mean, because yeah, we can put a Band-Aid on it, but we don't wanna put a lot of money into that building when we're probably gonna be, we could very well be making some significant changes. coming
Gary,
down the
Doug
road.
toured the building today too, and he thought it would make a good haunted house.
It would be great, yeah, that's
Did
great.
you climb the ladder to go upstairs?
I did show it to him.
Yeah.
But anyway, I mean, it's an ongoing thing, we'll be working with the city and see what their intentions are. And, the idea here to get started on it and get it,
But we can't necessarily wait on the city either.
no, but we're,
Because I don't think anything that the city's going to do, and it's gonna take a while before they really even come to the point of making a decision. Our time frame, I think, might be shorter than that.
right, Doug, but we're
I know, we need to ask the questions to the city, but that's not gonna be the roadblock that keeps us from moving on.
Well, if you have mold in the northeast corner, I assume that's Danny Scott's. So, I suppose you have to be concerned about her health, but it makes absolutely no sense to put any $900,000 into that building. Absolutely not.
No, but I think the point
So
is
we
that
might have to do it temporary.
well, Dan's solution sounds like a temporary fix, but a very, very short-term fix. I mean, I think nobody wants to advocate spending $500,000 or $600,000 or $700,000 or $800,000 on a building with a crumbling foundation, poor windows, poor ventilation.
And that we're gonna get kicked out.
Yeah, so, but then we need to do something, because otherwise it falls back to an active inaction. We might as well start crossing off the list of every suggestion that's been put out there that I've heard since I've been on the board, which is, why didn't you move into the Sears building? Or how come you haven't looked at leasing the building across the street? Or why haven't you fixed up the building that you're in? Or why don't you add on to the high school, and put the administration there, or every vacant lot in town? I think when people realize what some lease rates are, what building costs are, what, those kind of things need to be discovered by our BG&T committee, so we can start to formulate a strategy that gets everybody to, proper working environment. Any one of those options might be viable solutions long-term, but we need to start the process now.
Agreed.
Agreed, and even though,
And BG&T seems to be an excellent committee to do it.
Doesn't sound like policy to me.
Doesn't sound like finance either.
we can make a change of location, a rental, or, long before the city boots us out of the building. We just need a good, safe, solid place for our administration officials.
We need about 5,000 to 6,000 square feet. We have looked at some buildings, some have been inadequate, and others have been pretty pricey. $8,000 a month.
Oh
just-
my goodness.
Just for
Right,
the
so you have
office space.
$8,000 a month and you have dedicated 4 parking spots. That really doesn't work for us, but yet people put that out there as an option for us. So we've got certain requirements, they're certainly not grandiose, but we need to start looking at options, bringing them before BG&T so we can determine. You also need to find out what the city's doing.
Well, as Doug said, we can't wait for the city to force our hand, but, 2 years ago when we were having a discussion about it, it was a fairly high priority on the city's behalf to go ahead with that project. Anyone you ask will tell you that is no longer a number one priority. However, I think we need to, as you said, Sean, look at options on the list. Okay, if the city's not gonna make a decision within the next 5 years, then we're not gonna wait for the city, we need to make our own decisions. And that is an excellent thing to have a discussion about, whether it be a full board discussion or it starts at BG&T. We need to start looking at, okay, we either need to decide we're gonna be in the building, stick money into it, or we're gonna move out. And how much money are we willing to stick into it before we decide to move out? And that's kind of the stage that we're at right now. And yes, there's umpteen options that get thrown out to the community, whether it be the Boardman building or whatever else has been mentioned. And we wanted to have the discussion at the full board level because number one, we need to do something. The discussion needs to start. We need to start planning, and waiting on the city is not an option anymore. So,
I've asked the city to put their plans in writing for the board, they've yet to do that. But the last date that was quoted to me was 2020 for possible discussion again on the city building, so.
so I appreciate, Dan, you being here tonight to help with that discussion. We certainly can, as a Buildings and Grounds Committee, open up a discussion as far as what options would be. We're gonna make progress in implementing what we discussed tonight. I don't know, I think you're already working on it. And we'll certainly keep the board apprised of how things go. It would probably be advantageous to have another air sampling done at some point. Probably not spend the money to do it in the winter time, but do it next summer to see if our efforts have paid off. And there obviously will be more discussion coming on that in the future. So thank you for that, unless the board has any other questions of Dan.
We're talking about purchasing a dehumidifier,
Yeah.
commercial grade.
Right.
About how much do those run?
$2,000, some of them name it 2,000, and the fans are about 300 bucks a piece.
And then they need and then you vent it out to the, so that it empties itself, or?
Anything else before we move on? Brings us then to personnel recommendations. I would like the board to add under C, under approval of long-term substitute positions, add under North Freedom grade 4, it would be the Jack Young Middle School 7th grade language arts, and that name to be associated with that position is Cassie Smith, correct? So that's an addition for a third item under C. I'm not
Can we
aware.
vote on these separately? All three of them?
It's fine with me.
Okay.
I'm not aware of any approval of resignations. I'm not aware of any approval of new hires, so that brings us to C, which is the approval of the long-term substitutes, the first of which is for speech and language for 4K, and that is Jean Olson. Entertain a motion to that effect.
I move to approve.
Second.
Having a motion by Mearing, seconded by Bedrow, any discussion?
Just given the discussions that we've just had, I'm sure all of us are very happy to support some additional support for speech and language pathology.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. That brings us then to North Freedom grade 4, Andy Ellis. Entertain a motion to that effect.
I move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Mearing, seconded by Bedrow. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. Brings us then to the Jack Young Middle School 7th grade language arts position, Cassie Smith. Entertain a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Bedrow, seconded by Riley. Any discussion? Hearing none, those signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed,
I will abstain.
noting Mr. Mearing's abstention. Brings us then to the approval of the additional education assistant hours. The background for all of that was included in your board packet, so I would then take a motion for the North Freedom recommendation.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Having a motion by Riley, seconded by Mearing, is there any discussion in regards to Aid North Freedom? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. Brings us to the lunchroom homework assignment at Bearview High School.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Bedrow, seconded by McNevin. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. Jack Young Middle School Special Education Edition.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Mearing, who is the second? Mr. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. Brings us to the letter E item, the approval of the additional compensation for the district accountant, Gail Phoebe.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by McNevin, seconded by Bedrow. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. Brings us then to new business. And for the approval of disbursements, I'll turn to Chair of Finance, Mr. McNevin.
Move to approve.
Second.
Having a motion and a second, any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. Brings us then to B, the key benefits concept presentation. Just a little bit of background for the rest of the board, because it's been a while since we've talked about this. The Personnel Committee had several sessions with Nicole from KBC. Got to a point where it was a discussion that was worthy of beyond just the Personnel Committee. And that was late spring that we had our last session and decided that as we got into the fall, it would be advantageous to have a presentation to the full board so that everybody could kind of get a background on where we're at, and to save time, I'll stop talking and turn it over to Nicole.
Okay, so as I was mentioned, my name is Nicole Weiss. I'm a benefit wellness consultant with Key Benefit Concepts. And just a little background on us, we are a benefits and actuarial consulting firm, and we do provide post-employment valuation, actuarial valuations. What that is taking a look at each school district's retirement benefits that they offer and valuing the benefit, and it's something that needs to get reported on the district's financial statements each year, reporting what their outstanding liability is for the benefits that they're providing to their staff. So we do that. We work with about 80% of the school districts within the state. So having that wide breadth of clients, we do see what all the various school districts are offering, which it leads into our ability to then consult with districts when they are concerned about their benefits and the future of their benefits and which direction they would like to take. Because we work with so many of the school districts, we have a good background and understanding of what's going on in the world around you, the competitors, all throughout the state. That's just a little bit of background on us. I'm not going to bore you with all of this. Actuarial valuations, unless there's some numbers people in here, not very exciting. Usually when I go through a report with a district, it takes me about a good hour with the business manager to walk them through, explain the numbers, things like that. But we're going to just hit a few of the highlights. So how this whole process started is we started with your actuarial valuation. And so we just completed your evaluation earlier this spring. It's a snapshot in time as of July 1, 2013. However, we also value the benefits through the end of the fiscal year, so that takes us up through June 30th, 2014. In our report, we break out the information by classification, and what we're valuing is the benefits that you're offering to the different classifications that are available. Really quickly, within the report, we have two sections of the report. One is the other post-employment benefits, and has to do with the continued insurance plans that you allow, the continued medical coverage. And what these two numbers represent, I just like to quickly explain these. Normal cost is how much your collective group of active employees, how much they accrue during the course of each fiscal year. So during one fiscal year, the value of the benefits that you're achieving as you're working each year throughout the school year comes in at about $635,000. The second number is the unfunded actuarial accrued liability, and that's taking a look at how much of the benefits all the employees that are eligible for a benefit have accrued from their date of hire up through the snapshot in time, which for this report was July 1, 2013. So that came in at $8.2 million. So one of the ways I explain this to our clients when I'm on the phone with them, I said, if you had a wealthy benefactor that called the school district and said, I've got a lot of money for you guys, tell me how much it would cost to pay off your post-employment benefits. For this section of your benefits, it would be $8.2 million. And then going forward each year after that, an additional $635,000 would be needed in order to keep that benefit paid up, and each year be paid up totally. Another piece of the liability is for a benefit that was offered to teachers who retired between 2009 and 2011. There is no normal cost because no active employees are eligible for this benefit, but that liability came in at $2.2 million. So we're looking, between the two numbers, we're looking at over $10 million just to bring us up to July 1, 2013, if the district would suddenly come into a steady flow of cash. This chart just represents a projected cash flow of what the district could potentially pay out over the next 30 years based on your current benefit package. So the long and short of it is there's a lot of numbers on here, actuarials love the numbers, but the long and short of it is that the grand total projected over 30 years would be $26.4 million that would need to be paid out.
How many years was that?
30 years. If we just take, within these numbers here, we do have some numbers that are calculated for the retirees that are currently off and enjoying the benefit that's being offered to them. So that's the 26.4. If we just focus on the active employees, those that have not retired yet, the projected 30-year cash flow for them as they start to retire comes in at $23.1 million. So the active employees do take up a big portion of that $26 million, and the retirees represent a sliver of that liability. So when the district asked us to come in and start talking about post-employment benefits, we do what we call like a 3-meeting package. And what we do is we start with meeting 1, and that's really to focus on education. Talking about where the district stands currently, and like I said, I could go into a lot more detail about liability and things like that, but it's just talking about those numbers that we just looked at. The other part of the first meeting was to look at, okay, this is what you have, and this is what other districts around you have, and comparing and contrasting what the district currently offers to neighboring districts, as well as districts throughout the state as well. So just providing a little education and other ideas of what's out there. During our second meeting then, we reviewed the options that we talked about as part of the education session, had some discussions of, well, can you tell me a little bit more about this? What's the pros and cons of that? Kind of just walking through each one that came through and deciding, does that sound like something that would be attractive to the district or not? So having several conversations about that. Towards the end of the meeting, we did develop a draft option and said, okay, based on what we offer currently and the steps we think we want to take, we came up with a draft option. I then brought that back to our actuaries and asked them to run a cash flow on that option to show how that change would compare against the cash flow that we just saw that was run through your study. So we're doing an apples to apples comparison of the same people and saying, under the current benefit, it's that 26 million over 30 years, and this option is going to be this number over the 30 years as well. So the third meeting, I came back with those results. We did review those results and talked a little bit more about that, and we discussed any modifications that needed to be made to the package as well. So spent several hours with the personnel committee going through all of that, having discussions, making sure they understand what's going on in the districts around you, what parameters within your current benefit package that you have, and what different variations could be made from it. So what we did is we came up with an option. We always start with the teachers because that is the biggest base of any district, and it's pretty obvious that's your biggest population. But then through our discussions, we also then use the format that we developed for the teachers as well and put the administrator benefit as well into that package as well. So what we do is we come up with several different tiers. And the reasoning behind tiers, and this is very popular throughout all the different districts, is you don't want to do a dramatic change. Some districts have, because that's just with the financial situation that they were in, they had to make a drastic change, and this is what they put forward to their staff. We took more of the approach of let's do a graduated step down of the benefits so that those that are closer to retirement who don't have as much time to react to the change won't be affected as much as somebody who's newer to the district and has much more time to adapt to the change. So our first tier is tier 1. We kind of called them the grandfathered group. And this is looking at those current benefits that are currently in place right now, so there's no changes to what we're offering. So that's the qualifying for the tier. They had to be eligible to retire by June 30th, 2015, and actually retire by June 30th, 2015. To be eligible for the benefit and to get into this tier, they had to be at least age 55 with a minimum of 15 years of service by that June 30th, 2015 date. And the benefit that's offered is the current benefit for the teachers, contributing 88% of the HMO medical premium at the time of retirement, whatever that rate is at that time, and that benefit would be available for up to 4 years. There is a caveat: if you have 25 or more years of service, it would be available for up to 6 years. After that point then, if the teacher does exhaust the benefit, they could then choose to remain on the district's health insurance plan if they continue to 100% self-pay the premiums. So what we have in tier 1 here is status quo. It's what's being offered right now through the district.
Nicole, just to clarify, the benefit eligibility for the age 55, that's age 55 by the end of December, not the end of June, just so that we're clear on that.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, so looking at the tier 1 grandfather group, looking at the census that we used for the 2013 study that was completed earlier this year, there would be 29 people that would fall into that category of tier 1. And the benefit value based on the 13-14 rates, because that's what we had in spring when we were looking at this, the single range is listed and the family range is listed as well. So again, this is the exact benefit that's being offered today for the tier 1 benefit. Looking then to our next tier, we call this transition group number 1. So taking a look at, okay, what's our next level of benefits that would be considered to be offered. So what we did is said who could qualify for this tier. So the qualification is you're not eligible for tier number 1, or you did not retire in tier 1's time frame. So that again, you had to retire by June 30th, 2015. So somebody that was eligible for tier 1 decided not to retire by the end of the school year, they would then move into tier 2. The benefit eligibility, we did increase it slightly to age 57 with 15 years of service. And the reasoning behind this is, talking with the committee, not a lot of people are retiring at age 55, and that's true with the districts throughout the state. Very few people are actually retiring at age 55 these days. We're seeing a lot more 57, 59, even getting closer to 60 going forward now. So we thought bumping it up to age 57 really would not make much of an impact of the retirements that we've seen.
Are those ages shifting up?
The eligibility age, yes.
I mean, when people are retiring statewide?
Yes.
Okay, so it has been lower, it's now getting higher?
It's starting to go, yeah. And we're starting to see districts put in age 59 or even 60 too, just because their people aren't really retiring.
Okay.
There might be one or two off, but there's a majority more waiting till later on. So then talking with the board, discussing the different options that are available, the thought was to try to offer a health insurance product, but maybe not necessarily tie it directly to the premiums that would be available at the time of retirement. So we came up with the idea of looking at a premium-only HRA, and that's a health reimbursement account. And basically, it's a pot of money set aside to be used to help pay for health insurance premiums in retirement. So the thought was to contribute the $74.75 single or $16,950 family per year for a period of 3 years or until Medicare eligibility, whichever comes first. So with this setup, if somebody chose to retire at, let's say, age 63, that's just when they were ready, they would only be eligible for 2 years of this benefit because it goes until Medicare eligibility, which is currently 65. That may change in the future, there's been no official word on that, but that's why we say Medicare eligibility and not set a certain date, because it could change in the future. And then there is the caveat too, with 25 plus years of service, it would be for 5 years or until Medicare eligibility. So recognizing those with longer years of service. Looking at this group then, looking at the census, we had identified about 20 people that would be in that tier. And the benefit value is based on whether they're eligible for the 3 years or the 5 years, depending on how many years of service they have. So the range could be the $22,000 to the $37,000 for single, or $50,000 or $84,000 for family, depending on if they're going to get the 3 years or the 5 years. Then our third group was we're calling a transition group number 2. And at this point, we were starting to talk about, okay, trying to maybe open up the benefit to something that gives you a little bit more flexibility of how you use the benefit. With medical related plans, it's just for continued medical coverage. With a premium only HRA, which is in tier 2, you can only use it towards medical premiums. So you can't buy a cabin in the woods with the money, things like that. You're being told basically how you can spend the money. So in our discussions, we thought about kind of moving into something that's a little bit more flexible, gives the retiree the choice to use the money how they see fit. So looking with the transition group 2 and tier 3, the people that would qualify for this tier obviously can't be in tiers 1 or 2, and they would have at least 5 years of service as of 8/31/14. And we did use the end of the summer to recognize the fact that most of the time the school district is doing the majority of their hiring in August, so we didn't want to cut it off at a school year end date. We wanted to open it up through the end of summer to recognize that some people are hired towards the end of summer. To be eligible for the benefit at retirement, they have to be at least age 57 with a minimum of 15 years of service. So with this benefit, again, we were looking at opening it up so that the retiree could choose to use the benefit how they saw fit. One avenue to explore is a 403B contribution. Very similar to a 401k, it's just for the fact that school districts are not for profit organizations, so you don't qualify for a 401k, you qualify for a 403B. Very minimal differences between a 401k and a 403B, basically the same concept. And the benefit that we were looking at was contributing $2,000 per year of service up to a maximum of $50,000. So what would happen is when the person retired, we'd take a look at how many years of service they had at retirement, multiply that by the $2,000 and cap it up to a maximum of $50,000. The amount would then be paid out in even increments over a period of 5 years. So if somebody didn't make the $50,000 because they had 25 years of service, they would receive $10,000 contributions into their 403B for 5 years, for a maximum of $50,000. In looking at this group, we identified 94 people that would fall into that tier. So the benefit value would be anywhere between $30,000 and $50,000 because you do have to have at least 15 years of service in order to retire under this benefit, and then the maximum is the $50,000.
Nicole, what's the taxable treatment of that?
403B contributions are tax exempt for the district as they put the money in. It is taxable to the retiree when they pull it out, just like a traditional 401K. The thought is that possibly when somebody retires, they may possibly be in a lower tax bracket at the time of pulling the money out of their account. But again, with the 403B, you have the opportunity to spend the money on that cabin in the woods, give it to the grandkids, go on a trip. You get the flexibility of using the money however you see fit, as opposed to some of the other programs where you say it has to be used towards medical or it has to be used towards this. So it opens up sort of possibilities.
So that is funded by the district after retirement?
Yes,
Those
paid.
contributions start for the next 5 years?
Yes. Yeah.
But they may draw that down at whatever period of time they choose.
And so somebody may choose to wait, 3-4 years after retirement and then start drawing the funds. That's their choice when they need the money. It's
Is there
available
an
to
age
them.
when they can draw it up? It's like 59 and a half? Is
There's
that
no
the
penalties
policy?
after age 59 and a half, just like
It's
a traditional.
59 and a half before they could draw it out without a penalty.
Without a 10%, additional 10% penalty, correct?
And then mandatory distributions have to start occurring at what,
70 and a half,
70
yeah.
and a half?
And those are, slices of the amount, so it's not even withdrawing the whole amount, it's taking slices.
10% or
Yeah,
something.
it's taking slices of it out. All right, so that is tier 3 then. Tier 4 then would be the new benefits going forward, and that would include anybody with less than 5 years of service as of 8/31/14, and any future new hires going forward. This would be the package that the district would offer. So the benefit would be the 403B contribution and a match. So this is actually a 2-part benefit. This benefit would start with the employee's 5th year of employment. And the reason why that 5th year is in there is traditionally you'll see your highest level of turnover in your first 5 years of service. I'm sure you guys have seen people come in, people come out. I worked in HR for many years. I saw it a lot. So the thought behind that was to really start giving money to people who you think are going to stay with you. Granted, these days, nobody stays anywhere forever anymore. It's getting smaller and smaller chances of that. But at least recognizing that once you've been there for 5 years, the odds of you staying are a little bit better. So with this benefit, it would be an actively funded benefit, and what that means is that the district will be putting in these funds every single year. So what happens is that amount has to be deposited or set aside on that employee's behalf each and every year. So what the goal of this benefit is to have your benefit become a funded benefit, so that there is none of that $10 million of unfunded liability that we showed before. It will be a funded benefit going forward. So the benefit would be that the district would automatically contribute $500 per year. So at the end of every school year, they could say, at the end of June, we're gonna deposit $500 into your 403B account. You don't have to do anything, you don't have to put anything into your 403B account. That $500 is automatically put on your behalf by the district. If you're interested in earning a little bit more than that, just that $500, there's also the opportunity to have a matching contribution made on 403B contributions that the teacher makes themselves. So the district would provide a matching contribution of 100% on the first $500 the teacher contributes each year. So over the course of your payrolls, if you choose to, during the course of the school year, make contributions, the district will match 100% on the first $500 that you do. So, and the match also counts for anything less than $500. So if somebody just says, I want to get my feet wet, I want to do $5 a check, just see how it goes, they'll match that $5 contribution that the teacher puts in. The district will match the $5 as well for each one of those times they contributed. Because this is an actively funded benefit and the money is getting set aside each year, it is a good idea for the district to set up a vesting schedule so that people are not walking away with funds prior to the intention of hoping to have the person stick around for a little while. So we are looking at a vesting schedule, and this only applies to any district money that the district is putting into the account. So that $500 per year and the 100% match up to $500, it only applies to those dollars. Whenever an employee makes a contribution into a 403B, it's always 100% vested, it's always 100% yours. So if you only contribute for one check and put $5 in, that $5 is yours. It's not subject to the vesting schedule. But the vesting schedule, after 6 years of service, the employee would be 10% vested into their account, and for each year of service thereafter, they would earn an additional 10%, and then once they've been with the district for 15 years, they would be 100% vested. Okay? So what this does is open up a little bit of opportunity for both recruiting. This is a typical benefit that we're starting to see in more and more districts to entice people to come to the district and say, you don't have to work for us for a long time to get something. You can work for us for 6 years and then walk away with a piece of your retirement package. But if you do stay with us for 15 years, you're gonna have 100% vested into all the district money. What's nice about a 403B is that as it becomes vested and as those district funds are being put into your account, you're in charge of the funds. You choose to be as aggressive as you want in the market or as conservative as you want in the market. There's everything from like a savings account concept of investing all the way to going right out to the stock market and investing in Fortune 500 companies. So this puts the employee in charge of their retirement and allows them to also contribute to their retirement as well. Okay. Looking at this, based on the current census, obviously we can't project the new hires right this second, but the people that had less than 5 years of service, we were looking at 106 employees. The benefit value, that's going to vary based on how aggressively the person contributes into the plan, how they invest their dollars, and whether or not they're putting those $500 of their own dollars in each year as well. So that one's a little bit harder to calculate exactly what it could be. So then what we did is once we had the framework for the teachers, we also decided, because the administrator benefit is so close to what the teachers are offering, we also slotted them into the same setup as well. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into as much detail, but basically tiers 1 and 2, there's just some slight modifications based on the current package that the administration is receiving as far as number of years, but otherwise it's a very similar setup. So for tier 1 for the administrators, there's 1 person identified. Tier 2, same idea, just the difference of how many years of coverage. 2 people in tier 2. Tier 3 is the exact same benefit as what the teacher benefit is. And there was 12 people identified. And then tier 4 again is the same benefit. There was 11 identified in that one as well. So very similar setups, just the tier 1 and 2 have slightly different number of years.
Are there laws that dictate that when you have these defined benefit plans like this, that we couldn't do separate ones? They have to kind of be pretty close in the type?
No, you can have your administrator benefit be whatever you want it to be, and you can have your teacher benefit be whatever you want it to be. There's no requirement. As long as you treat everybody within the same classification the same, and base it off of years of service or things like that, then you're okay.
Okay, but I mean, yeah, there's similar things like years of service and other things.
It was just that when we looked at both of the benefits that are currently being offered, they're so close, and there's just only slight modifications in the number of years that the framework that we were setting up kind of fell naturally
There'd be
into
no
both
reason.
classifications.
Yeah,
There's no
that's
reason.
right.
Correct. But we did value it based on the fact that both the teachers and the administrators would be into this new tech framework.
Sure.
Okay, so as I said before, we took the 2013 study that we did and compared it against this option cash flow. So I did take it back to the actuaries, had them run it. The cash flow for this option came in at, over 30 years, came in at $13.2 million, as opposed to the $26.4 million that the current benefit projected over 30 years was going to look like. So it did reduce the cash flow by about $13.1 million, or about 49.89%. Okay, so on the surface, it does show a good reduction. That's the direction that the district wants to go. It's showing that the benefit made a difference in the numbers. One of the really important things that when I work with the district, we can look at the number and say, okay, great, 49%, if that's the district's goal, that's wonderful, we hit the goal. But one of the really important things, and that's why I did give the board copies of this, is long story, when you look over the 30 years, yes, there is that reduction. However, based on the way that the benefit is structured, with that tier 4 benefit being actively funded, there's going to be some increase in cash flow over the first about 5 years or so of this. If this program would go into place, there is going to be an increased cash flow for the first 5 years, due to the fact that you're now actively funding a benefit, whereas before your benefit was only started when somebody actually retired. So it's really important to see that. So what I have in the first section of the green is just your current actives and current retirees. So taking the census that we had from our study and the retiree census that we had and just running everybody through the course of time. Then what the actuaries did in the yellow columns in the middle is we projected, based on WRS rates of retirement, separation, disability, mortality, when we think people are going to retire over the course of time and how many new hires would need to be brought in to replace the people that retire. And that new hire column there is cumulative, so it keeps adding a number of new hires on top of each other. So there's not going to be 101 new hires in 1 year. That would be horrible. But it gives you an overall cumulative running. But basically, projecting out that tier 4 benefit over the course of 30 years would increase the cash flow by about $1.7 million. So that gives us our $13.2 million in the very last green column. But the important thing to look at is the differences between the next few years. What you'll see is that, for example, for the 2014 fiscal year, under the current package, where we're not really looking at new hires, we're looking at $782,000. I'm sorry, I gotta go to the next year. $801,000 for 2015. However, under this new package, because there will be actually funding benefits, we're looking at $999,000. So like I said, there would be some increase in the cash flow for the first few years to start funding that active benefit. And it goes on until about 2020 is the first time you're gonna see the difference. It would have been projected to be 638, it would be 615. So there's a slight reduction starting there, and then after that, the cash flow is projected to be lower. So the important thing to realize is, yes, overall, there is a reduction in the cash flow. However, the district would need to be prepared for an increase in cash flow for the next 5 years or so in order to get to the point where you're gonna start seeing the reduction.
There's an assumption in that we are maintaining number of staff,
Yes.
both administrators and teachers?
As
throughout that
actuaries, we like to predict the worst case scenario, so within these numbers, that sounds bad, but the most full, the most full benefit. So within these projections, we're also projecting that every single person that's eligible for Tier 4 is gonna contribute their own $500 to get the $500 from the district. So this is showing you what, if full-fledged everything went gung-ho, this is what it would look like. One of the important things, and this is just valuing, our numbers that we have, like the $26 million, this is just predicting the cash flow of your post-employment benefits. So that's the continued medical benefit that you're offering in now. That does not include the WRS benefit that both the employees and the district is paying for on behalf of the staff. This is an addition. What you're offering is in addition to WRS. So this is just the cash flow for your continued medical coverage that you're offering right now and the proposed option that was developed. Any other questions? I know there's a lot of actuaries love numbers, so. Alright, that's, basically what I had prepared, so the personnel committee just asked me to come and kind of quickly, we spent many, many hours together, so this is just a really brief overview of what we actually talked about, but.
Nicole, can you go through the first two big numbers that you presented? One of them is on our balance sheet, and the other one talks about cash flow. Can you explain those differences to me? The one's the $8.8 million that's.
Yeah, so what we do, we calculate what your liability, so this is a liability that the district needs to carry on the books to say, up through the snapshot in time of our study, which was the 7/113, this is the accrued liability for any active employee that's eligible, either the teachers or the administrators, for a benefit up through July 1, 2013, how much they've accrued in the background. Now granted, not everybody's gonna retire from the district and get the benefit, but based on what they've accrued so far, it came in at that $8.26 million.
So this represents a slice of that $23 million cash flow projection.
Well, see, what happens is this liability is kind of looking backwards, where the cash flow projections are looking forward of what you're actually gonna spend out, what you're actually gonna pay out. So if you had a checkbook for the district, that's how much you'd be writing out each year and the amounts for the benefit that's gonna be paid out for each retiree in that year total. So these numbers are really just looking backwards, but like I said, if you wanted to be 100% fully funded, and the district, I failed to point out before, the district does have a trust, the balance as of 7/113 was $310,000. So you have set aside some funds to help offset the cost of your liability. So really that $8.2 million is really closer to $8.5 million because, we subtracted out the trust assets, so you do have part of it funded. Okay. So basically the idea behind working our way towards an actively funded benefit is to try to get this off the books. I'm not an accountant or anything like that, but I know that having this liability on your books does affect your bond ratings and things like that. And if a district needs to go out and borrow money, borrow funds, things like that, the higher your liability rating can affect what rates you get for your bond ratings as well and what you can borrow. So, the intention of working towards an active benefit was trying to get this off your books to reduce that liability in the financials.
How does Bearville compare with other school districts? Is this pretty much standard?
Yeah, what we saw over, the last, and these studies had been done starting back to about 2006. So we've got almost, 8-9 years under our belt. A lot of the times, the benefit was a continuing medical benefit. You can stay on our medical plan for 5 years. You can stay on it for 8 years, whatever the district was offering. That was very common. The problem and why people are starting to come to us and say we need some help is those benefits are all tied to medical inflation, because you're saying you can stay on my medical plan, and when you retire in 10 years, the medical premium is going to be, well, I don't know, we can apply a medical trend and try to predict it, because nobody knows what that premium is going to be in 10 years. Unfortunately, any paper you pick up or any newscast you watch, the cost of medical insurance is going up every single year, and there's only so many tweaks you can do to your medical plan to try to control those costs. So in that cash flow, one of the things you'll see is that your numbers stay kind of steady, and then all of a sudden they start to really start jumping up. And that's that medical trend that we're applying to try to predict what those medical premiums are gonna be going out 30 years. I don't have a crystal ball, but we can apply medical trend with the actuaries and say, this is what it could potentially look like. We may not be 100% perfect, but it gives you an idea of what it could look like.
Could be better, could be worse.
Yeah, and we have to do, we do
Yeah.
studies every 2 years or 3 years, depending on the district. We have to make slight adjustments, because nobody has the perfect idea of what's gonna happen.
Oh, sure.
Well, we've just gone through a period both in the school board and on the Sauk County Board where we have seen, as a result of the Affordable Care Act, some significant reductions in the rise of healthcare costs. And I think that trend is going to continue. I don't have a magic wand or a crystal ball, but certainly there has been a significant difference over the last 2 or 3 years, especially with our health insurance providers coming to us and saying, we are going to give you a bigger deal, we're going to cap the increases. We are, in the county, have just reduced our costs by something like 8%. And the school board, we've had a significant drop. So I think as we look at those cases and the trends, we might want to zero in a little bit more, sharpen our pencils, as we used to say.
I will tell you, being in the industry and whatever, we'll see renewals, they'll say, we'll cap your next year increase at 8%. Well, that's still an 8% increase over the premiums that you're paying. And usually the second or third year, they enticed you with the cap, and then they don't necessarily always keep that. Now, if you have great wellness programs and things like that, and you're controlling your costs with, as a district, that's the other piece of what I do too, is promoting the plans and trying to look at what you're spending and things like that as well. There are things you can do, but still, regardless, very few people are gonna ever see negative medical trends. It's gonna continue going up by any range of percentage from 1% to 10%, so, is what we're seeing. And the average is 8.
What are the trends over the last 10 years as far as health, the cost of healthcare?
Medical inflation is 4 times that of the rate of normal inflation, so that's one of the biggest pieces right there. And like I said, the average increases, renewals are 8%. It's just going up.
I know for a couple of years it was 12, 14.
Yeah, it has come down, but still 8% is still 8% on top of what you're already paying. You have that increase by 8% each year, not working places into where they wanna be. Or if they got
A lot of schools have funded liabilities like this, or they're not really?
There are some districts that have their trust, they have their trust set aside, and they have several $1 million in there, and they are pretty much funded of their benefit. They just had some great opportunities where they could do that. Only about 25% of the districts in the state have a trust, so the fact that you guys do have one is wonderful. You're actually in the minority by having one, so, but it's wonderful. Any amount of money that you can set aside to help offset that is wonderful. But budgets are budgets, you're dealing with the state and how much they're providing, so there's not always room in the budget to start funding, setting large dollar amounts aside to help fund this.
Can I suggest to the board, a lot of this information for some board members is new, it's a lot to digest. You may have questions tomorrow that you don't have tonight. If there's questions that come up, can I ask that they be funneled through Craig, and he can then get them to Nicole? Whether those questions pertain to the presentation tonight or something that wasn't covered. I think that it is important that we continue this discussion, but I think it's not appropriate to ask anyone to have an answer tonight as to how we move forward, because I think it's important to take time to look at what the options are that were presented and allow for some time for feedback. If that's agreeable with the rest of the board. Unless anyone has any questions right now of Nicole.
And I always say, I don't get paid for reducing the numbers or things like that. My whole purpose is to be here to educate, to help run the actuarial numbers and things like that. If a school board totally scraps all the work that I did, so be it. That's their decision, but it's up to, wanted to show you what it would look like based on the thoughts that, the committee had, and where you wanna go with that going forward is up to you. We can help in any way that we can.
Nicole, I just want to clarify kind of the big rocks here. What I'm reading in this report and in your conversations with the committee is a desire and an attempt to ensure that the longest term teachers in our district remain as constant as possible, and that's the number I read at 29 for the grandfathered.
Yeah, and it's my understanding that there was, I was basically told that there's an agreement that we weren't gonna change it, so that's why we developed the grandfather
Correct,
tiers.
correct.
Really, we didn't, there wasn't much to design with tier one because it was the current benefit, so we just
Right, and
determined
so
it was
part
it.
of what this is sharing is the concerns that were raised earlier by some of our longer-term faculty and some of our retirees in particular, is that this first grandfathered in portion affecting 29 folks is attempting to keep that benefit as constant as possible with what has. And that the transition group number 1, which is the next tier, which affects 20 people, is making a very modest adjustment.
It's like taking the numbers that we had currently and kind of just placing them in as a placeholder and saying this is what the benefit is.
Okay.
So as opposed to letting medical trend do its thing, it's, you know, it's saying this is what the number's gonna be. And then one clarification with tier 2 is, you had to be eligible to retire by, I believe it was 2020, I can't say, I don't know how to say that yet, 2020. But you're not required to retire by 2020, so if that person decides to retire, you know, in 3 years after that, they would still get tier 2. It's just, tier 1 is the only one that has a caveat of retiring by such and such a date. All the other tiers are open.
Anything else? Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We will be in touch.
Right?
Brings us then to C, the approval of the city and county fiber lease for the Civic Center, which there was a lot of paperwork involved, and I would ask Matt to just cut through the paperwork and tell us what you're suggesting we do and why, and I'll turn it over to you.
Hopefully everybody had an opportunity to look cover letter that I put in on your report packet. Very simply, we're providing we have a unique opportunity to provide robust internet access to the Civic Center at a very low cost, similar to the cost we're paying now the first year, and then after that it's going to be like $600 less than we're paying. So we'll have, it's just like having a campus school basically to the Civic Center. So really looking at that lease, it's a 1-year lease. This first year we're going to pay about $284 more to put that in place, and then the next year it's going to be $206 total to have that internet connectivity.
So it's
again,
how much less, $600 less roughly?
after this year it'll be $600 less. Yeah. So this initial year it's going to be about $200 more because they have to splice fiber and put things in place. So.
Okay.
I think it's a great opportunity, really, to, again, provide robust access to the Civic Center and support those existing students and staff that are there.
Any question?
Move to approve.
Second.
Having a motion and a second and a very adequate explanation, is there any further discussion?
It's a wonderful.
Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. Thank you for sticking around to explain that. I would entertain a motion to go into closed session according to the statutes in the posting.
I'll second that.
Roll call, Cummings?
Yes.
McNevin?
Yes.
Marion?
Yes.
Ortner?
Yes.
Riley? Yes. Vedro? Yes. Bodak, yes. 5 minutes.